If we want to talk later about entrepreneurship, it's
Yeah.
really the harder you work, the more results you will get.
What's the hardest personality that cannot cope with Dubai?
So this is this scale kind of visualization, right? Of, I want to have more on this side versus more on this side. But that doesn't mean it needs to be balanced.
Nadine Mezher, co-founder of Sarwa, is a fintech leader with over 20 years of experience in brand building and business management. Recognized by Forbes and Fast Company, she's a venture partner and advisor shaping the future of entrepreneurship and innovation in the Middle East.
But the reality is, you can't just wait for someone to come and fix things for you. Do you want to build a small, sustainable business that you're growing over generations? Then you can do that, and you can build it stone by stone.
Hey, how are you?
Good. How are you?
Finally, great to have you again.
Thank you.
I mean, we've been trying to reach you for some time now, I think was it late last year when Linda tried to come to you?
Probably. It's been a while. Let's put
And
it
it's been
this way.
hectic. It's been hectic, hasn't
I
it?
think everyone's life is super busy.
Amazing in Dubai. It's like, I'll tell you what, and when I speak to anyone who's not from Dubai, so we're talking to people from the UK, people from other parts of the Middle East. They're so slow, relatively speaking. I was like, no, we have it to, we need to have it next week. No, we'll get it to you next month. Like, no, next month is too far. And then you speak to people
Very true.
in Dubai. It's just crazy, isn't it?
It is. It's a fast-paced city.
Very much.
Yes.
And I think it's fast-paced because the more you give it, the more it'll give you.
That's true. That is true, right? Definitely, I agree. And I think it has some correlation to do with, work ethics. And if we want to talk later about entrepreneurship, it's
Yeah.
really the harder you work, the more results you will get. But also, according to my kids, you have mama to work very smart too. So it's a combination of both. But I don't think there's a right and wrong per se.
Okay, so no judgment. Just like a little bit for people who wake up. I mean, I was just having a discussion with a friend of mine who's from Jordan. I'm like, you know what? People from Jordan, and nothing against people from Jordan at all, right?
Beautiful people.
Beautiful people, beautiful country. I love it. It's my country, right? But when you wake up at 10 a.m. to go and buy something and everybody's asleep and all shops are kind of closed, right? Literally closed on a work day. I'm not talking about weekend. Forget about the weekend because weekend's like till 1 p.m., right?
Mm-hmm.
And then you complain about the economy.
Yes. So this definitely goes hand in hand. And you see it in different countries, where different places, whether across the Middle East or Europe, or where it's a slower pace of life. It's a different way of living, I want to say, right? But then there is a correlation between the economic results and the lifestyle. Again, is it good or bad? Long debate.
As long as people don't complain.
True.
You know what I mean?
Be content and know the reality of things.
Exactly, because you can explain everything in life. You say that, you know what, why Dubai is this?
Like
And,
that.
as long as you can explain, it's fine. You understand, you bring it to your awareness that no, it's because how much work you're putting in, this is how much you get out.
And that's why Dubai is Dubai. That's why other places are other places.
I mean, literally, yesterday, I had another podcast with a guest of mine. I came here early, 7:30. I went down, I got a haircut. 7:30 a.m. Where does this happen? I mean, a barbershop opening at 7:30 a.m.? Seriously?
I know. I'm pretty sure everyone listening, or even you, would know that when you have visitors from abroad and you tell them, they tell you they need something and you just make it happen within half an hour, they're really very positively surprised, I want to say. Like the other day I had a friend and she needed some medication for her kid, and I just ordered it online and it was there in 20 minutes, and she was shocked. And she's like, usually we have to go, and there's no even delivery where she lives right now. But that concept of being, so spoiled in a way, but also having things come to you very easily, but that gives you also the need to reciproc and give back and be also as fast-paced as the city, right?
Exactly. I mean, I love the way you put it. It's really a two-edged sword, because if you're if you're motivated by achievement and you're actually someone who can, if the tide is, if you're swimming with the tide, you actually put more. You don't just relax and get the tide.
True.
Here, you can get stressed. You can get left out. You can look out. And if you're comparing yourself to others, you will always be stressed and
Worst thing you can
depressed.
do.
Crazy, isn't it?
Yes.
Like we have our kids in the morning, and when we prepare them to school and their lunch boxes at 6 a.m., like every other parent in Dubai, right? And there's this one thing, apples are not there. What do? You reach out to your talabat. And then 6:30, it's at your doorstep. I mean, where's
24/7.
24/7.
It's a 24/7 city, and we love it. And I think there's no place on earth like Dubai. Again, you will see there's pros and cons to every place, right? And it depends on what, like you said, like your personality, your goals in life, what you want out of it, and the stages maybe, because we all go through different stages. So, but this is a place where things happen.
So what's the hardest, or let's say from a personality perspective, from your experience, and we'll get into multiple topics, but from your experience, what's the hardest personality that cannot cope with Dubai, from your experience?
Oh, there are different personas. Just like I like how I use the word persona, but this is something we're so used to in the workspace. But I think segments and personas.
Yeah.
But I give you a small example.
Yeah.
Some people. So I'm Lebanese, right? And I know that a lot of Lebanese coming here will have difficulty to cope because of what you were referring to earlier. They have a more life than work balance, and I think that's a different way of approaching life too. And they love the social interaction, something happening every day socially, and this kind of person might find it difficult to be here, because here life is demanding on every front. There is a very active social life. There's also a very active and demanding work life, right? So it's a different approach to how you want to live your life.
So if you're not used to, I hate this word, balancing, work-life balance. If you're not able
There's
to
no balance.
There's no balance. Thank
There's no
you.
balance.
Oh, thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, we have someone who agrees. Because the concept of, I'll tell you what, why do I hate it is because when you say work-life balance, I immediately think of the scale, either or.
But that's the thing. So this is this scale kind of visualization, right? Of, I want to have more on this side versus more on this side. But that doesn't mean it needs to be balanced, right? It's life. It's your life. It's how you want to live it and your goals. And
As
That's
long
it.
as you're not complaining. So I'm happy with
do
someone
not complain.
who's making. Okay, if anyone who's followed me for any period of time knows that I hate complaining. It's all your fault, nothing else. Even whatever happens, it's my fault. You know what I mean? But the point that I'm trying to make is it's never zero sum. I mean, I can have work and life both at the same time.
Absolutely.
I mean, look at my business here. My business partner is my wife. My daughter, actually, she's 16. Sometimes she sits next to me while I'm doing some piece of work, and she engages with me while I'm there. It's like, Daddy, like this morning, she asked me about a client of mine. I was like, what happened to this client? And it was 6:30 a.m. And I'm like, and I actually conversed with her about that project.
Beautiful.
Why not? I mean, why do you have to have a zero-sum game between work and life? And the word balance necessitates that zero sum, because it's either or, isn't it? I mean, it's a mindset. It's reframing the game itself.
It's a lot of very different variables in one place, right? And I think, look, ultimately, there's no box. We cannot box everyone in the
True.
same frame. It depends on you, again, and what you want out of life. And to me, life is literally what happens around you, right?
Yes.
And it's just about, if you want to go into the ultimate question of happiness and what is happiness, it's about being content with what you have and trying to really kind of be in the rein, but not necessarily thinking that you can control everything, but try to navigate what you can control, right? So going back to your complaining, you should not complain if you're able to change things around you. Then be part of the change.
Exactly.
Be part of the change.
Exactly.
And not just say, this is wrong and this is wrong and this is wrong. Because we can all do that and nothing will happen and everything continues to be the same. But if we actually, each of us feels like we have some sort of responsibility towards our community, first our family and then the broader community and then everything around us, then change happens. You take action. And I think that's extremely key and it's really important.
Nadine, that's so powerful. That's so powerful. I mean, the way you put it is you start with your family, take responsibility, and then your community. And then so see what you have control over, focus on that first, and then look at others. In our community, in our tradition, where do people always point fingers at the government?
Again, I'm a big believer in taking action because speaking is easy, I think. But the reality is, if we want to see things happening positively, then you need to be part of the positive change around you. And you can't just wait for someone to come and fix things for you. Because who's that other person? Like, everyone can say the same. So who is that person that's going to come and fix things for you if you are not part of that change? We can all just wait to be saved, but nothing will happen. And I think going back to our countries, I think there's so much we can be part of to make things happen. Right?
Exactly. And I think off camera, we spoke about something, discipline, and we spoke about showing up. We spoke about just putting in the work, right? Just actually focus on your own merit.
100%.
Make sure that you're able to conduct yourself in the most substantive way, not performative way, not show, not the kind of crust, but actually a heavyweight that can actually conduct yourself in the most stressful situations. And there's no alternative.
No, and sometimes it's really simple things we can do. You don't have to be doing something major that takes, headlines. But even with our kids in the day-to-day interaction, we were talking also about education, and I am a massive believer that the only way to change things positively is to start building a generation the way we want the world to be, right? So how do you educate this new generation on the things that need to be fixed, or what to focus on, or how to interact with each other, or have to have respect towards one another? And you can't, it goes back to also the idea of community, right? If each of us thinks about what's best for me, then the whole system collapses. Like, you have to think in a community basis. You have to think, and you have to teach the kids to think like that. We can't go back to being individualistic, right? There is definitely the part of how can I make myself happy and comfortable, and also how can I contribute beyond that, right? And I think that's key. And I think we need to, if you want to talk about our communities, we really had that at the core. And I think this is one of the things that, in terms of the values that our societies have ingrained, this needs to continue. And you have a beautiful ripple effect if that's done right.
Exactly.
And done right is very key.
That's the key. I think the question that I'm kind of perpetually, for eternity, kind of having it in my mind is, how do we know? Right? How do we know we're doing it right? Because you can be skewed easily with the noise that's out there. You can easily think about, like, you're doing something and you're on a path, but then because everyone else is just not as aware, it's very difficult to know how you're doing it right. And I love how you balance between community and individual, because it's not like you let go of yourself. No, you have to take care of yourself.
Of
like
course.
Anyone who traveled even any period of time knows that put your own mask first. I remember very first time I saw it, I got so furious because, like, me before my and the image is so provocative, right? It's always a father, not a mother, a father and his child, right? It's very provocative because it makes you think. But then, I mean, I got aware of it early on. Is like, yeah, that's right. If I'm not taking care of myself, how can I run after my kids without panting or fighting for breath? I have to take care of myself, and that means I have to take care of my well-being, my fitness, my mental state, my education, my work. But it all comes back to intention. If I'm doing it for them. So if my individualistic is actually done for the community, then that's a win-win, isn't it?
It is a win-win. It is a win-win. I completely agree. Yes.
And there's no alternative.
And I like the word intention and awareness. And how do we bring that awareness? How do we become aware of everything around us and the impact that we have on it, right?
And that way, I mean, in my world at least, the only way is to have unfiltered, no fluff, really hard conversations while looking in the mirror, right? I look in the mirror and I say, this is how it is, call a spade, address the elephant in the room. Because if we don't do that, how else can we know? And how else can we bring awareness to it? Like sometimes I don't want to reach to a shocking moment, because sometimes a shock can have irreversible consequences.
It's true.
But then how can I not reach? I mean, I've read a line the other day in one of the books. It says, a smart person learns from his own mistakes. A wise person learns from the mistakes of others. But how do you know about the mistakes of others and how relevant is it to you unless you're able to look in yourself in the mirror and see that? But our culture doesn't allow that, does it?
In certain places,
Mhm.
right? I think, look, we talk a lot in my surroundings about this, and this culture versus this culture versus this culture. I don't think there's one culture that got it right? There's right and wrong in every place. There's beauty and ugliness in every country. It's just about understanding what works and what doesn't, right? And going back to your point, how do we know? There's some past knowledge from previous generation,
Yeah.
and I think these past knowledges have been sort of a way of filtering what works and what doesn't, right? But to me, the most important place to start is tolerance towards the other
Yes.
and acceptance of the other in their differences, no matter who they are and what they do. But then also, for lack of a better word is or sentence is, put yourself in someone else's shoes, right?
100%.
It's great to be inwardly reflective, but it's also good to sometimes think, okay, this person, what could they be going through and how would I have reacted if that was the situation? And see it from the different perspectives, because there's always different perspectives.
I like that. I'm guilty.
Going very philosophical here.
It's true. No, because it's true. Listen, there are things that I'm very guilty of this. I'm a very pragmatic person, extremely pragmatic. And to the point that sometimes it's difficult for me to understand why someone reacts the way they act. And that's why I went into my research of understanding the meanings people put behind the behaviors that they do. Because if we judge the behavior in its surface value, the way we see it, then obviously we're missing the point. But if we dig deeper and see the basic assumptions, the experience, I mean, we're baggages of experiences, right? And there's no way on earth that I would know or anyone would know the experiences that I've had in my past life. And how did that viscerally affected my reaction to certain situations? So again, that's not an excuse, that's an explanation. And I always say explanation is not justification, right? But you have to understand the root causes if you are actually meaningfully intending to change and to make change. So your point is 100% taken, and I'm working on that, because otherwise...
I mean, I think we're all work in progress somehow, right? Like we never get to where we really want to be. But that's the beauty of the journey. I think it's really just knowing that we can keep learning across, whether it's personal life, whether it's work, whether it's in everything that we do, you can be a better version, right? You can always be a better version of yourself.
What do you think of vulnerability?
Somehow it is important because it opens you up to experiences, and that's how we learn. I mean, if you're shutting out everything, then you're not evolving.
How do I know I'm vulnerable?
Oh, that's a nice question. You know yourself. You know that you're actually receiving that feeling that's different than your comfort zone, right? And I think it boils down to getting out of your comfort zone, pushing yourself beyond that limit. Because it's very easy to stay where we are.
Yes.
It's a human nature to want to not change physiologically and mentally and psychologically. But then if really is what you're looking for is to better yourself, then you need to be open to change. And one of the ways to be open to that is to receive feelings that are not comfortable for you. So being vulnerable. It's important.
Exactly. No, I 100% agree. And I think one of the key research findings that I always come across about this part of the world is vulnerability. People like to put their best face forward, and their hate. That's why failure is a no-no. That's why risk-taking is a no-no. That's why saving face is a no-no. That's why you try to always not show the worst side of you as much as possible, hide it, which creates, that's why you always respect authority, because you don't want to inflict that on authority. So there's respect for authority. That's a positive thing. And when I say authority, I mean a boss, a manager, a leader, whatever it is that you call, you're either a subordinate or they're hired to you societally or professionally. And in my mind, and again, I'm still researching that, that is one of the key root causes to us not able to, and we'll talk about investment, and we'll talk about fintech, we'll talk about entrepreneurship, and we'll talk about education and learning. But if we start from there, that's why, and I just read that stat, and I haven't checked it, we have a pre-seed funding of less than 7% in this part of the world compared to 37% in other parts of the world. Because we don't like to take risks, because we hate failure. And failure is part of us projecting vulnerability that I failed. What do you feel about that?
I feel there's different layers to that, right? So when we're talking about, and I come from that background of tech entrepreneurship and VC-backed companies. But there's different ways to look into this. And I give the example of, because different cultures, different places, different ways of thinking. But Lebanon, for example, is extremely business-oriented and entrepreneurial mindset generally, if you think about it. Most of the businesses in Lebanon are SMEs. Most of the businesses are small businesses here and there, or family businesses, or little jobs. And so I wouldn't necessarily say we're risk averse. I think as a society, and not to stereotype and not to put everyone in one place, but as a society, we are risk takers. Everyone. But then you have the flip side of it, which is we all want to be bosses, right? So there's a different way to think about it. It's a different approach to businesses, right? So when you talk about seed funding, this is a very sort of American model that we're bringing into the region. It's been here for a long time. People like Fadi Randour or, many others have pioneered also that a while back.
Absolutely. Because they saw the problem, right?
Because they saw the problem and they saw that there is this way of solving it.
Yes.
That doesn't necessarily mean it's the only way, right? So taking risk has different connotation. But for example, going back again to the example of Lebanon, it doesn't mean that they were getting seed funding. They were just starting businesses out of scratch. So it's a different approach. Again, I don't think there's a right and wrong if you have the right mindset of, I want to make what I do the best in its category, right? Like if I have a small bakery, I want my bread to be the best bread. Maybe it's not the best bread, but you know what? People come to me because I have a big smile in the morning and I know everyone's name, right? So that's your USP. It's just about if you want to succeed in anything that you do, how can you be the best at what you do? That's it. That to me is one of the roadmaps to success.
Now I can hear a couple of people who are saying it's all about resources as well.
Yes and no, because it depends on your goal. What are you trying to achieve? Do you want to go very quick and very fast into a mass market? Yes, then you need all the resources that you can have your hands on. Do you want to build a small, sustainable business that you're growing over generations? Then you can do that and you can build it stone by stone. So it depends on your goals in life and what you want to achieve in your life.
So just to kind of double down on what you said about Lebanon, according to my research, and again, please fact check me, Lebanon has more tech startups than everywhere in the Middle East apart from the UAE. It has more than, in 2024, last report I saw, it was 5,000 tech startups. Saudi had 1,800.
I wouldn't be surprised, and I don't know if the numbers
I
are
was
correct.
surprised. Because, that exactly rhymes with everything you're saying. When you have a will, you have a way. If you actually have the intent. Because now, come on, knowledge is abundant, right? I mean, there's no excuse.
100%.
You can go and you don't need a certificate. You don't need a degree. You don't need this fancy Ivy League or Russell Group university for you to be able to start your own business. You can start it literally from when you're 19.
100%. But again, I go back to depending on what you want out of like. So Ivy Leagues are great to open a network. It's also a way of like education at university level has different objectives, and you need to be smart about how you use these, right? And they're tools like anything else in life. But to your point, today you have a phone, you have a laptop, you can access knowledge everywhere in the world. And but you need the mindset. I think that's it.
Yes.
I think we really, every time we go back to what is the base is your mindset, is your ambition, your discipline, and your ability to be humble, to know that I can keep learning and there's so much that I still need to know and absorb.
Absolutely.
Right?
I keep learning. They one of the things that I find as a consultant/coach in this part of the world relative to other parts of the world, and again, I keep on comparing, not for sake of comparing or putting down or up, just to kind of look ourselves in the mirror and see what is wrong, what is right, and actually fix what is wrong, the challenges, and put desires and actually follow them. It's very difficult for people here to admit that they don't know. Like learning especially the older you get. Like I had one professor who I was adjunct with teaching a class from the University of Manchester. He was 70-plus-year-old. He knew how to use every single option and nitty-gritty detail of Zoom better than me. And I'm a tech person. Like he knew how to, like the way he was 70, exactly when I asked him how old he was 74-year-old. That was 3 years ago. And I was adjunct with him. And the way he just puts people in and out of room, it was so seamless for 3 days, absolutely fascinating. And I looked at him and I'm like, I know people who are in their 40s, my age, until now, they ask someone to help them with their Windows. You know what I mean?
True. Yeah, I do. Look, neuroflexibility is amazing, right? The ability of our brain to keep developing and learning is amazing. Granted, there is limitation with age, right? But we shouldn't dismiss the fact that you can keep learning just because someone hits a certain age. And I think maybe that's one thing about that could be improved in our side of the world is that, right? Like we do have that tendency to say, oh, yeah, but I'm this age, so that's it. Like there's nothing else I can do. No, there is a lot you can do. You can work on it. You can keep building these neurocells in different ways, right? Again, there's biology to it, but now we're learning more and more about the brain's capacity and ability.
Neuroplasticity, exactly.
Exactly.
And, and I get why people do that, because again, sometimes I have many ads running and funnels and so on and so forth. And when I run an ad in a certain part of our region, I see the quality of people, right? I see the quality of responses, even content. When you release content in certain parts of our region, it's different. And I actually had to stop it because it's a waste. So I didn't know what to do. I actually don't. And that's why I want to build something really big to change those things. Because sometimes there's no point in trying to carve a stone with a plastic fork, so.
I mean, you could. It takes a lot of time, right? Like
and energy and wastage.
The water and
exactly. I mean, again, it goes back to resources, of course. It goes
and goals and objectives and what you want to do. Right?
Exactly. So, what do you think about the state of entrepreneurship in our region? And again, I can see that you're politically trying to be careful and this and that. So please
But I truly believe in this. Look, I've lived in different places in the world, and as you know, as many of us here in the region, we have families around the globe, right?
Yes.
So we are in some way very global citizens. I think our region has been, and again, as Lebanese, historically, anthropologically, everything that's happening, families are cross-shattered, but also it is part of maybe our DNA is just world travelers. So you see different ways, and I've worked, in Italy, I've worked in France, I've worked to a certain degree with the US, and I've been here for 17 years, and Dubai is, by all definition, a very global city. So you see different ways of thinking, different perspectives, different frameworks. And there is, again, never a right and wrong. There's pros and cons. There's good, there's bad, everywhere, right? So I'm personally about focusing on the good. And if there's a bad, and I love that you started with that, is okay, you know what? Let's focus on this. How can we fix it? And I think that's also part of the entrepreneurial mindset, is to think in solution mode
Yes.
rather than in problem mode.
Absolutely.
Right? So if there's something wrong, let's not nag, let's not complain. Let's say, okay, that's a way to look into it. These are the things we can do. These are the things I can do, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then is there anyone else out there that can support in working towards that solution, right? And I apply this in every part of my life. I think it is important to do that.
So what's the state of entrepreneurship in our region? From your vantage point?
We could do better
Okay. Can you tell me more?
on the global scale.
Yes.
Right.
The economy is connected, right?
Today, more than ever. Before, it used to be you could sit in your,
Your family kind of grocery store and,
Yes. And that's beautiful, by the way. Like the concept of a village, again, I don't know if you've watched this show called Blue Zone. And anyways, it's one data point. It's not all data points, but it talks about, centenarians and people that live above 100. Why do they? There definitely can be more research on that. But one data point that they have is the concept of a village.
The blue zone, yeah.
So that there is beauty to that.
Yes.
But now, if you want to talk on a country scale,
on a macro
level, and how can we compete? We have incredible talent.
So not just compete, Nadine.
How
contribute.
Contribute.
Yes.
I like that word. Beautifully worded. How can we contribute? Again, goes back to bettering yourself, learning, right? We need to be more open to continuous learning and building solutions for our societies and contributing more to the economy and uplifting people while we do it as much as we can, right?
So part of what the research that I did is looking at the landscape of innovation. And innovation is literally either, you can quantify it, you can, have qualitative sort of measures to measure the innovation production. There are two levels or two sort of parallel ways to look at innovation, just to kind of identify the what. Because people can, if I ask 10 people what is innovation, you get 10 answers, right? So let's just kind of stick to one and then run with it. Innovation is practically, like you said, finding problems and then innovating, creating inventions. So inventions could be research papers that are published and then turned into commercialized elements that then changes people's lives in a point that they can pay money for it to acquire it and better their life and lifestyle and so on and so forth. Others can be patent applications, other can be technology production and exportation and so on and so forth. So if we take one metric, which is the Global Innovation Index from the United Nations, it has 7 metrics. I think 4 are qualitative and 4 are quantitative and 3 are qualitative. So one of the qualitative is business sophistication, ease of doing business, and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
Obviously, the Dubai and the UAE is at the forefront of the region, but it's still 32. And for the last 15 years, it's always been between 37, 35, 32, and so on and so forth. Now, there are lots of things, and when I dug deep into this, obviously, we don't have research papers. So education, to your point, normalized. So I'm not talking about China has, 2 billion or 1.5 billion. US has, normalized to 1 million. So
per capita.
Per capita, exactly. Patent application, we don't have that. But that's one lane. The other lane is, which is a bit economical, you have the rent seeking versus economic rent. So for example, if I do a business, either it's transferring of value or creating value out of thin air. So transferring of value, for example, is finance, it's real estate, or any monopolistic technology. So for example, Do and Itsalat and others, those are monopolies naturally, which is a good thing because this is how things should be in this part of the world. Rent or economic rent is taking raw materials and then adding so much value to it that you create value from thin air. When you dig deeper into our region, and this is the research that I've done, you'll find that if you go east, it's massive heat map, like red from the amount of exportation, publications, patent register. If you go to the west, similar story. We're a blind spot. What gives? I mean, you're obviously contributing to the heat map because you're doing a fintech and tech, you're doing everything you can. So I'm not talking about individually. That's why I said, what's the state of entrepreneurship at a collective level? Because there are, obviously, we have Mudassar and the story from soap.com and other. So there are few stories. You have, obviously, you mentioned Fadi Ghandour. So we have pockets of brilliant minds who created brilliant innovations that actually contributed at a world stage. My intention, and again, this is not a problem, this is just me trying to explore.
But you're right.
What is the critical thing that we're missing so we can have that gush of this type of mindset? Apart from the burger joints and the specialty coffee.
You
And
still have a lot of amazing stories in R&D and scientific research and everything. Unfortunately, there are few here, but mostly abroad, of people from the region that went abroad, right? So you do have, whether it's in the US, in Europe, in Asia, everywhere. My personal, and that's a personal opinion, I think we are at this stage where we're heading there. And I think we will see, hopefully, a change in terms of the innovation coming out of the region. We do have the talent, we do have the brains, we do have the mindset, we do have all of this. But you need certain basics and infrastructure to be able, and stability to be able to get to that point. And I think the region, if we're talking broader, has not necessarily known that for a long time, historically, right? And there are cycles. And I feel like now you see a lot of wonderful things coming out of Saudi, coming out of the UAE, coming out of many different hubs, including as Lebanon has a tech hub, and I think you will continue seeing that growth happening. Egypt, Morocco, Tunis, you will see it. People now talking about the tech in Syria. I think there is change coming, and I think it's just about having the basics to get there. Now, another, for example, angle to go back to your point and data point from a UN perspective, the grants. I think we need to see more grants in research and development that can be a propeller for future innovation too. So it's not just individual; it has to be more standardized as
institutionalized.
Yes.
We're missing that. Well, let's go back. Let's start with education. So you're an AUB graduate, right?
Yes.
How was your time in AUB?
Beautiful.
You loved it. What's the best memory?
Oh, so many. But I mean, AUB first is a beautiful campus, by the way. And I always need nature around to be inspired, right? And that just visually, it's a beautiful campus. The fact that for Lebanon, you had a lot of people from the region also, so that enriches your experience. In learning, we had great professors. So you do have, and it's not an easy university. So it's an American university, but with a very Lebanese approach to education, which is
rigor. Yeah,
exactly. So it's, and I remember at the time when we used to apply for our masters, you would have a letter also from university saying that our grades are actually deflated. So it's a tougher kind of grading system that we had, but there's a lot of community feel to the university, and there's a lot of network support. Like till today, people still reach out and say, "Oh, AUB, we can we have a conversation?" Or even from the administration themselves, they really try to support students that came out of the university, and they want to highlight the success stories, and they're trying to, I believe, do the best they can within what they have. Can it be better? Of course, it can always be better.
How old is the university?
It's quite old. I think it used to be called also the Syrian University.
I think so. It's very old. I mean, I remember when I finished high school back in the 90s, I would kill to go to AUB. I couldn't, for other reasons, but it's actually at the time,
it is a legacy.
It was the Harvard of our region, right? So everybody who I remember my age wanted to go to AUB, and few of them went there, And you can see the success in their life trajectories from that point onwards. So there's absolute legacy and absolute impact
100%.
from people who are living, who graduated or attended that university. And until now, it's obviously one of the top universities in our region.
So I'll give you a small
Yes.
anecdote. I used to work in the Office of Development in AUB. So I loved working since I was a child, and it is part of the culture ingrained in us through my dad specifically, is to start working very early. So he'd involve us in his business, me and my siblings, since we were very young. And in AUB, I was working in AUB. So it's a merit-based program, so Office of Development. And we used to see, so we were like interns, and they give us all these little things to do, like filing, right?
Yes,
At the
yeah.
time, it was all very manual.
Dossiers and
Dossier, you pull and they start looking into the different files. And they were dated, right? So by years.
Okay, the categorization.
Right,
Yeah.
categorization by, graduation years and so on. And my friend and I, we wanted to find we had this challenges, who can find the oldest student? But it was beautiful to hold these little files of people back from the Ottoman Empire and saying,
wow.
it was still Osmani, and it's so interesting to see this different perspective and the mix of students that AUB held back in the days. That was still very
It was
kind
a
of
beacon
rich
of knowledge and research, and still is,
It's beautiful. And so there's a lot of these pockets that we have that make us proud, and I think we should.
Absolutely, and we should absolutely look.
We're very old civilizations. You have some from across the region, some of the oldest cities in the world, some of the oldest continuously inhabited cities of the world,
Yes,
right? So
yes.
that's a wealth of knowledge by itself.
And that's unequivocally and objectively true. And one of the things that I personally was extremely ashamed, and I called myself out a million times, is not knowing Al-Muqaddimah, the book by Ibn Khaldun. And why I was ashamed is because it was told to me by a colleague of mine while I was studying at the University of Manchester, right? So he actually told me, and he's not even from this part of the world, and he actually had a copy of it in English, translated, obviously, because it's very well known back there in their worlds, but it's not as known to me. And I was like, of course I was ashamed, but then I was like, why didn't I know about it? You know what I mean? Like it's just this frustration that the more you know about your legacy, about your heritage, and again, nothing nationalistic here, nothing political, nothing religious. It's just a matter of historical facts that it's when you know about it, it makes you proud. But here's my question that I'm trying to understand. Why aren't we, so let's say AUB and others, at the ranks of Harvard, Stanford, objectively speaking, I'm saying, from knowledge production, from I don't want to talk about the certificates and the accreditations, but actual production of knowledge and, generally speaking, just contributing to the world's, world from betterment of everything. Why isn't there? Why isn't it there? What's stopping us?
I think this probably would take us a very long time to answer, and we need definitely more than this podcast. But look, I don't know.
Fair answer. Very fair answer.
But my interpretation would be is, again, going back to the basics and the pyramids of necessity, right? When you have other struggles in life, this is not where the society is going to put its best effort. When you have your basics covered, you go up in ranks and you start to kind of think, okay, how can we become more enlightened? I can speak for my country because that's where I spent, at least my teenage years and university years. I went, by the way, after AUB to Italy and France, and I did a second degree. And I grew up in Saudi before. But if you want to talk about Lebanon, I think there's different answers to that. One is historically, our region has been more of a trade-focused region. there's definitely a lot of innovation that came out, including, if you want to go back to the time of the Canaani and the Phoenicians, the alphabet, yes. But there was a lot of the trade element in our culture.
Yeah.
That could have potentially continued till today, is where more business people, but also the stability of the country. It's been in survival mode for the longest time. So I don't think that's where human mindset is at currently. But if it was to be a stable place that allows for that sort of evolution, then I think you'll see different trends popping, right? That's one side of the equation. I'm not saying that's all the answer, but that's at least something that to be looked into.
The way I see it is we're at a crossroad now, because there's a massive wealth transfer and knowledge transfer and even soft power transfer from the global north to the global south. And this is the time where everyone has to wake up and look at the different challenges they have in their life. I mean, I 100% subscribe to what you're saying. I was born and raised here in UAE, in Dubai. I was absolutely lucky. I had zero contribution to where I am now, because my family was middle class, happy, like things that, to your point, many of the people in other parts of our region did not have. And obviously the priorities will be different. But time now has changed. Even if you have that, it's the information age now rather than the network or who you know or what you have access to. Because now, genuinely speaking, like you said, we can go back to our roots. I mean, like you said, 400 years ago, 500 years ago, everybody was poor, relatively speaking, but still we were able to create and produce and be beacons of knowledge, right, and research. The thing that I see, and I was having a friend of mine who is also a manager of talent, I've spoke to you about him, he's telling me that most people want to be fashionistas or YouTubers, gamers, or this and that. Well, you know what, no judgment there, but when I'm talking about the collective, right, it's like the economic concept of rent seeking versus economic rent. So if rent seeking, you're just opening businesses that just transfer value. Now, obviously at a macro level, the economy will be super dependent and not obviously creating things. And it's just creating from one pocket to the other, and that's it. So you have to have this balance, and that has to happen at a larger scale. So the same thing, if everyone, when you open your, and that's why I genuinely, and again, I'm not popular for saying this, I'm avoiding Arabic content. Right.
I wanted to ask you about this. So why is that?
If you
want more, let's say, if we're talking about a region and how can we help uplift it, or for lack of a better word, or how can we push forward,
True,
right?
yeah.
Let's not continue focusing on the past, what happened, what's happening, because that's also part of the blaming game, right? This happened, so I can't. No, if we are where we are today and we want to move forward and we're looking to the future, what can we do to make it better? So if you have the majority that's still kind of dependent on Arabic content, which, by the way, again, like when we talk about access to knowledge, and it's amazing now how much you have information online. Anything you want to look up, you can find.
True.
And something as basic, we're talking about a fit out of a place the other day, and what is the best, flooring to have. You could just go and look it up and ask what is the best for stains, for this, for that, and give whatever ChatGPT or any prompt that you want to put in any tool, and you will get that answer, right? So
I agree.
There's no reason to not know, but most of that knowledge is in the English language. So if you're talking about, and we assume that most of the population here speaks English, yes, might be true speaking, but that's different than using it on day to day, right? And we still lack so much in terms of Arabic content. There is, but not enough, and not for everything.
True.
And sometimes it's actually very skewed towards the negative versus the positive.
Yes.
I'm throwing that question.
No, I love that. I love that challenge because it's been nagging my mind forever, and I tried it. I've put Arabic content out there.
You did find the audience.
Not just the audience. The audience, look, it's a matter of resources and strategic timing, right? So unfortunately, people, especially in our part of the world, there are two main problems or main rules of the game that I'm playing with. And I'm playing with it with shame in my mind, but I'm playing them because it is what it is. You know, when you have control, you can swim against the tide, but then you can swim for so much and then you'll drown, right? The two are authority. So by authority, I mean certificates, accreditation, so on and so forth. For the longest period, I rejected that and I reached nowhere at all. People did not even want to speak to us. The moment I got the authority, the certification, the accreditation, the whatever it is that needs to be taken for people to at least consider you a serious person, if I show you a data point, if I put the data point of how things happened, personally I'm saying, right? Someone who's literally a nobody, comes from nowhere, has no connections, nothing, right? Nothing would happen. But the problem is people are persuaded, and the triggers of influence here are extremely skewed to performative acts. So once that happened, things happened. The second thing is, which is a phenomena that has been heavily studied, my wife actually is doing her PhD now on it, is native speakerism, right? You have someone from the UK, you have someone who's speaking a language that is not yours, people look at them differently with seriousness. Now, these are rules of the game I did not put, and I tried to fight.
But depending where and what.
Well, okay, so let me tackle that exactly. I'm now working with multiple universities. I actually approached multiple universities to see how part of my business is to see how we can link academia with industry through research and then obviously supplement the funding, but also the R&D. So there's like a benevolent sort of exchange of value between these two, let's say, sectors, right? Higher education, research, they have bright minds, energy, resources when it comes to knowledge. And then you have industry, resources, money, and actual application. I've spoken to those, and I've spoken to those. Those people said, oh, it's these people's fault. And I'm talking about presidents of universities. Yeah, I have the records. These people are not listening to us, And I spoke to these, I was like, oh, these are theoreticals, they don't understand, and The university that I was able to sign with is not from this part of the world. And they actually welcomed us with open arms. Now, what I will do is I will bring that university, because of its name and its legacy and its brand, obviously, I will bring it here, and I can guarantee you things will happen and people will open up their doors. Now, would I have been having the ability and intention to continue doing what I'm doing here? Yes, of course I would, if I have enough oxygen in the tank, if that makes sense. But I don't. You know what I mean? I don't come from a second wealth generation person who has his father's money or family money. I don't have that at all. So I have to make do with what we have, and I have to create value from thin air. But to do that, I have to play by the rules of the game. Now, I'm playing it strategically because in my path, there has to be an inflection point where, you know what? Things has to happen here. Now, that being said, it's not nationalistic and it's not related to ethnicity, language. Those are, to me, means to a different end. For example, Dubai is a melting pot of every nationality. The fact that people are doing things from here is the intention. It's not who is doing it. You know what I mean? Like the intention is, if people are doing it from here, from Jordan, from Lebanon, from Syria, it's like because the economy does not know ethnicity. Economy does not know ethnicity at a large.
Does not know.
If you're like, that's why people, like, to your point, you said if you're like many bright brains from here go to UK and actually excel more than people living in the UK.
Because you have the right infrastructure.
Because you have the right infrastructure, right. Exactly.
We're still in the building mode.
Yes.
We're still in the building mode, and it's stone by stone. But Dubai, again, is different.
Absolutely different. Unequivocally different, yeah.
Just as an example, Sarwa was built here, from here, for the region, right? So it was with open arms that we were received here, and we launched this company.
So tell me about Sarwa, yeah. Tell me about it. So eager to hear about it.
Going back to Dubai, which is a very special case, because Dubai is like a startup anyways in its thinking. It's very innovative, it's very forward-thinking, and it comes from leadership and cascades across.
Absolutely.
Like you need the right leadership to allow things to happen. That's the basic. So we started
At the
Sarwa
macro level, yes, 100%
at a macro
agree.
level, because then you're able to change things quicker and faster on a society and a community and a population level. But one of the reasons, so when Mark and Jad and I were thinking about Sarwa, so I have two co-founders, Mark is the CEO, Jad CTO, and they were in Canada at the time, and they were looking into the region, where can we start Sarwa? Where can Sarwa, be born? And we looked into different options, and Dubai was the one that stood out. Because at the time they did have the programs to welcome fintechs from around the world.
The IFC, right?
The IFC Fintech Hive. And so that was an accelerator program by the government that allowed you to also sit with the regulators on the same table
To
and
change
talk about
paradigm, yes.
change laws and regulations and sandbox framework
100%.
of how can we create innovation, right? So you had that framework happening, and it allowed all of these companies to be seeded and then to grow, and then an entire ecosystem could have been shaped based on that. It was there before, but if you talk to the previous fintech players that were before us, it was a much more difficult journey. But once you had that infrastructure in place and that framework being put, then everything is possible, right? And then you see all of this happening, and then it just accelerates. Hence the word accelerator.
Yes.
Right. So it just makes innovation so much faster.
Especially in fintech, because it's heavily regulated. You're
Absolutely.
dealing with people's money, right?
Absolutely. And it should be.
Should
to a
be.
certain degree,
100%,
right?
yeah.
But also it goes hand in hand with how do you not inhibit innovation, and how
Yes.
can you make sure that you allow change to happen while protecting the end user, which is key. Like, this is important, right? It's a very interesting. So my son right now is in Uzbekistan, and they're in a MUN conference. So
Oh,
the
yeah,
school,
yeah, I know that.
and they're talking. So one of the key talking points is about AI and AI regulation. So it's beautiful to hear these young
Debaters,
students
yeah.
debating on, but regulation is gonna be stiffening any sort of like a new and open innovation and all of this. But then there's the other point of where, but there needs to be some sort of framework to protect the end user, because then
How do you protect?
back to the balance.
Yeah,
That's a
yeah.
word. But the Hive definitely gave us that access to go to market and to be able to change things, right? And then it takes time for an entire industry to change, but at least you have that trigger that takes.
You have the facilitation, right?
The ease of business, right? Going back to
Yes.
that is also they don't want to overcomplicate things, but they want to make sure that it's done properly.
So what was the one thing that the Hive had that made you make the decision?
I would say few things. So the fact that it's in the IFC, which is geographically very key. So you're in the middle of a financial hub.
Right.
That we're digital, we're a tech company, so we're cloud-based, everything. So our trade, everything happens digitally. But even Dubai as a city is very centrally positioned, right? But at the time, even for trade, if you're talking time zone, it's very centrally positioned. You have ease of access to all the different stakeholders. So regulators are right there. You can sit with them, we have our account manager. Hey, can we pop in for a second to show you a slide? Because that's what we're working.
Wow. And they give you that
So
sort
there
of...
was this conversational approach, right? Once you're in the sandbox, absolutely. You have the other stakeholders, so the banks and so on. But also you had the investor base.
Yes.
They connect you. So there was an ease of connectivity, I would say, within the Hive. And just the mindset of, we're open to business. Let's talk. What can you do? What can you bring? And from a government entity to be so open, I think this is unique to...
Absolutely unique. Exactly. I mean, I think the word that comes to mind is frictionless.
Yeah.
Just makes you feel like sometimes you get discouraged and you know what? I don't want to, because of the amount of hurdles that you have to, or the hoops.
It's a barrier to entry, right? Hurdles to me are a barrier to entry, because when people tell you, oh, it's tough, it's challenging.
Do you want a barrier to entry for economy to thrive? I mean,
It-
you
it-
have to have barriers, like, for example, regulations, frameworks. You can't just have anyone just open a fintech, and you have to have sort of
No, but that was a bit more selfish in terms of barrier to entry thinking.
right,
Right, in terms of competition, right? Like when you also have some sort of a hurdle. I'm talking generally and not only in fintech and anything that you do. When you
Yeah.
see a challenge, mostly people turn away, right? They're like, this is too hard. But then the people that push through
Yeah.
are the ones that actually can.
Oh, that's across,
special, right?
that's across entrepreneurship.
Exactly.
It's crazy. You have to,
And
yeah,
that to me, that's where I would
Yeah.
actually think of barrier to entry, right? To me, I see challenges as opportunities. I see
Yeah.
something that's hard
Exciting.
as exciting. I'd be like, okay, so this is difficult, which means not a lot of people are going to try to and attempt to solve it.
Yes.
Let's see what we can do. So that's where things become interesting.
But that's for you, because you're a person who's driven by
But
obviously
that's my
challenge.
character. That's my
Exactly. That's your
Yeah.
character. And, we need more of you, Nadine. I mean, the thing is, people get discouraged. I mean, we started by saying, people point to things. And what's the first thing they point at is government. And I'm like, okay, what do you want the government to do? Do you want it to create an app for you? I mean, if you're saying, I'm working with one of the startups who have 35 or 36 people in their employment under their payroll, and they're all over the place, from Nigeria to even in Ukraine to Serbia to India to, like, they're a-national. You know what I mean? Like there's nothing, and they're working together, and they're actually working at a seed at a Series A fund, and they're working to secure $10 million. They can't complain about government because there's literally no government. Yen said, like, if you're creating something, and if you're creating something so valuable, it creates that magnetic effect that people actually would want to invest, facilitate. But if you're, I mean, sorry to say this, if you're working on something that sucks, you probably have to think twice and not defend your effort, right?
Yes. I think the base is to have something interesting. And then there's a lot of different layers after that. But for sure, you need something that's solving something and that has a need in the market, or else, unless you're creating it for yourself, which is fine. But then if you actually want growth, then you need to be addressing a pain point or addressing a problem.
Yes.
Or trying to come up with something that is really needed to facilitate other stuff.
Creates desire, right?
Creating a desire becomes the second layer, because
Yes.
you can have the best product, service, anything in the world, but then if people don't hear about it or know about it,
Yeah.
or are excited to adopt, then you're not going to go anywhere. Yeah.
So what does Sarwa try to solve?
We wanted to bring investing to the young professionals. And there's a lot of personal stories that were happening around that time of people from the family that wanted to invest and couldn't, right? So
To invest.
pre-Sarwa, we're talking pre-Sarwa, right? So if you have, we've always said, especially in the region, but that's been a global thing, in the US and North America and Europe, they solved it before. But usually you would have to have wealth to create wealth. You have to have money to be able to invest in the markets. It's been something that shifted very much, very fast in the last decade to 2 decades, right? So, but in the region, when we started Sarwa, there was no solution from here that addressed that. So you needed to have a certain amount of money to go to a financial advisor for them to take you. There's a minimum where you can start investing. And the platforms that actually were accessible in the region were international ones, and they tended to be more for sophisticated investors or people that know really a lot about investing and were comfortable in investing. So there's no solution that was for everybody. So we always used to say we wanted to democratize investing, especially for the region, for the young professionals in the region. When in many countries around, you didn't necessarily have pension funds, for example. So there was a lot of education that we wanted to do in terms of take care of future you. Think about your future. And our communities, our societies are built, and that's a beautiful thing of cyclical caring, right?
Yes.
So your parents, they get older. It's the time of the kids to take care of their parents. They'll have kids. Their kids will take care of them. There's no proper framework for you to be comfortable when you're older. So that was one way of thinking about it is, okay, you know what? Now you can create this account where it acts as if this is your pension fund, or for your parents, or for your kids, for their education, or for you for a specific goal. So you start slowly educating about the importance of first budgeting and saving first, because that's another issue that we wanted to tackle is we are heavy on consumerism. And as you mentioned, we do also tend to like to compare ourselves to others. So there was spending done the wrong way, and it needed to be addressed. Is make sure you don't have debt, make sure you're putting money aside, and once you have that money, invest it smartly, and smartly is the key, right? Don't do it in a way that exposes you to a lot of risk. Now I have to be also very clear that, and that's my disclaimer in finance, is that each person, they have different, personal situations and financial situations. So not everything applies to everyone.
It's
So
not a
you
broad
really
brush,
need to do your due diligence and make sure you do.
There's personal
research,
responsibility that
yes,
people have to
yes.
take for themselves. Yeah.
Yes.
So you're trying to undo the damage that is done by other fintech providers who shall remain unnamed, who contributed to the debt, especially in Saudi and UAE, and had to be curbed down by the amount of debt that they accumulated on the consumerism behavior that our society
But
is.
not only fintech, but generally, I'm pretty sure a lot of people that are driving the nicest car, but they can't really afford the nicest car. Not that you
What's the
shouldn't make yourself
status?
happy. Like, make yourself happy, but be smart,
not happy.
because that's yeah.
It's not
Don't put
happy, but-
financial stress on yourself, because that's the worst thing you can do. This is one of the root causes for unhappiness and underproductivity. And even if we want to talk about, corporate and employees,
Yeah.
there's so much research and data that shows a complete correlation between financial stabilities of employees and the level of productivity.
Yes.
So even if you want to have a successful business, make sure your employees are actually in a sound place financially.
The floor is debt free.
Yeah.
Not maxing your credit cards and having a couple of cars who you park and then show off with. Because the stat is crazy. The other day I read the stat. What was the stat about the amount of posh cars and all of those kind of high? It feels
I
like
don't know. I
80,
didn't see that one.
like more than 80% of the cars that are here in the region are actually not just on loan, but also people are defaulting.
Oh.
Like it's crazy. And the other thing is all of those sort of installment payments of, you buy your phone on installments, you buy your fridge on installments, you buy on all of this facilitation. It actually demanded a regulation that was posed that you cannot have more than X amount of dirhams or riyals, because people just went crazy with it.
Yes. So that's a way where regulators step in and make sure that the end user is actually protected. And also that's the whole credit system. It's a business, right? And that's a form that was taken. That's an approach, definitely, that's
Very capitalistic.
Very capitalistic. And in the States, it's a given, right? And again, going back to every country will have pros and cons. Every place will have the positive and the negative. And it's just about understanding, what do we want to take from whoever we're learning from that will add value, and not the other way around, right? Whether it's our societies or others, or our culture or others, or
it's the human condition, right? It's not us versus them. It's not.
no, it's a global world.
Exactly. And genuinely speaking, the other day I was just listening to an economic analyst who was talking about the tariffs and how China and US and this and that, and the perspective that he was coming with is genuinely, if one economy suffers, the world suffers at a large scale. I'm not talking about the elites. I'm talking about the people, right? And if I want to make sure that, like, I see that the most selfish thing you can do, even if it's an individual act, is to be in debt, because that accumulates into an economic deficit that actually, your productivity is low. So imagine this is en masse. So the entire economy productivity is low. That contributes to behavioral issues, because now one of the things that I always am fascinated about is driving between 7 to 8 in Dubai. I mean, I don't know how is your experience on that.
Morning or night?
Morning.
Okay.
Well, we don't talk about night. I don't go out at night because of obvious reasons, but morning, people are rushing to their works. I mean, you find someone in his G-class Mercedes or BMW or Porsche, and he's driving like a maniac. I mean, you would expect that this guy is someone who is an authority, a leader, who doesn't care if he punches in or punches out on time. He doesn't have a lead, but yet the amount of chaotic driving in the morning, just crossing each other, is just, to me, it's fascinating. Don't get me wrong there. It's just a data point in the analysis of like one day I was just having it as part of the research that I'll do in the next 10, 20 years. I don't know how much I have from resources to do as much research, but it's just actually go to 10 cities in the world, just video the way people drive, and then correlate that to the economic stability, the debt, and the value and the value creation, value transfer, the one that I talked about. So correlate all of this and see how, because if you're driving, let's say, for 3 hours in a street, and then you're videoing things and seeing the behavior of people, and then comparing it to other cities, and then have that correlated to economic metrics, productivity metrics, innovation metrics, and so on and so forth.
And education, there's a lot to do with education. And culture, right? And when I talk about education, it doesn't necessarily mean school. It means about public education through generation, house, everything, right? Because some countries, they focus a lot on certain aspects and bettering them versus other countries, right? And the way you drive is a reflection of also that educational system.
It is, to a large degree, and that's one data point. So that's a very interesting point, and I second that. I remember.
So why do you think they rush in the morning?
Because
I don't think they're, like you said, it's not about being late to work.
Is it? I mean, you and I are entrepreneurs, so we're just driving on the right lane, seeing
Well, I have
them.
kids, so it's a different kind of approach to the way you have kids too. Yeah. But there's the morning drop-offs and
Do you
pickups.
drop them off to school?
So we have a system, my husband and I, where he drops them off and I pick them up. And if he can't, then we flip, right?
Oh, no, okay. So you have a collaborator. Okay, fine.
Yeah.
I mean, this comes again from peace of mind, right? From you are not waking up 2 a.m. in the morning and staying up for 3 hours because you know that you're due for some payment on your mortgage or your car payment or your credit card the next day. You know what I mean? Like this nagging, waking up 2 a.m. I'm not talking about the entrepreneur waking up 2 a.m. because he has an idea. That's a good type of waking up, right? But I'm talking about the one that actually is
insomnia.
Yeah.
I'll be curious once you get to this research to understand a bit more. But I think, look, also Dubai is a very unique kind of city.
Oh, Dubai is the best in the region. I mean,
no, but even from that data point, because I think also the driving in Dubai is very reflective of the population in Dubai, which is quite mixed and quite. So there you have, even in driving,
cultures,
there's different cultures, and you can sort of more or less.
So let me tell you my initial findings from one of my researches that hasn't been empirically substantiated, but let me tell you my thought process. So the culture, work culture, organization. So there are two types of culture. There's macro culture, which is the national cultures, and so on and so forth. That's, I haven't yet studied. I've just read about it. But the one that I did is organizational cultures.
Okay.
And organizational cultures predominantly in the UAE are, leaning towards the control type. So control type means respect for authority, process-oriented, kind of more towards the controlling rather than the output. Structure, exactly. Which means most people are in organizations that are of the control type. So there's authority, there's patriarchal respect, and so on. And so. But by patriarchal, I don't mean the traditional way, I mean the authority way. So there's like the person at the top, he's controlling, but I respect him.
Tends to be a man, anyways. So
tends to be a man, exactly, which is a negative point, to your point. But the point is, it's a patriarchal sort of authority. So whether it's a man or a woman in that context, I respect them. So I cannot say no to. I have to, I cannot object, and so on and so forth. Anyway, so that's the culture. Now, all studies in the world says that if you have this type of culture, you cannot produce innovation. And you will not be able to have a productive workforce, and you'll have high churn rate, you will have low morale, all of those negative metrics. However, my research have produced the opposite. In spite and despite of having that control culture, you actually have a double-digit growth that is, to a large degree, contributed to innovation and people actually being productive.
Okay.
Now, to me, that was a big red alert because it was like, something is not right. But then when I dug deeper, and this is the part that I didn't yet, and this is the second phase of my research, is that 80% to 90% of the population are expats. And they're working here on visas. They're working here away from home. Their livelihood is dependent on their work. It's not like if you don't like it, you can leave and live in your mom's basement. You can't do that. You have to leave. And what do you leave? You leave your Porsche, you leave your golden handcuffs that you've put on yourself. So what does that mean? You will have to put your head down, bite the bullet, and keep on working in spite of the environment that you think you're not happy with. So employee satisfaction, of course, self-reported employee satisfaction is absolutely wrong and no one should take it. Self-reporting anything should not be taken, right? It has to be triangulated with multiple other data points, like observation and But the point is, you go to those leaders of organizations, and this was my research. So I spoke to them and I said, hey, this is like, no, look at my reports. And they look at the financial reports and says, actually, people are producing. Look at employee satisfaction. And of course, people are afraid to speak up, so they'll put whatever they have to put. In addition to, our culture is patriarchal culture, meaning I respect my father, I respect my mother, I respect my elderly, I respect my boss,
figure, yes.
my authority figure, lovingly. And actually, what was fascinating to me is when a boss does something that is counterproductive, you'll find the employees actually creating excuses for them, because of this and because of that and haram and and I'm like, okay. So I juxtapose that with other parts of the world. Let's say in Morocco. In Morocco, we had a business from here trying to operate in Morocco. Okay. It couldn't. So when they hired people from Morocco, they did not last for 3-4 months and they quit. Because they brought the culture the same. Why? Because they're Moroccans in Morocco, they can go back to their, like, what? I don't want this. And they just leave.
Of course.
Similarly in Jordan, similarly in Lebanon, similarly in other ways. So there is, again, this is not an alarm. It's not like substantiated yet. So I'm still digging deeper into this. But in my mind, at least, this is a ticking time bomb. Because until when? You know what I mean? Like, it's a false sense of achievement that we think it's sustainable, but is it?
Well, it depends. It depends because also, look, in anything, I'll throw the example of marketing. When you go into a new market, you understand your market and you understand the affinities in the market and the culture in the market and the subcultures in that market, right? Same applies to corporate. We have different ways of doing things depending on where we grew up. So wherever you want to go, and if we're talking about a business that wants to open a new office or actually penetrate a new market, you need to understand how they do things.
Yep.
You can't just replicate the same exact thing. Even going back, for example, to Sarwa. Sarwa we started as a robo-advisor, and you have robo-advisory. It started in the US and then Canada and then Europe. And when we started it here, granted, we took something that worked there, but we shaped it for this region because the way people think here are differently. The way they invest is different. The way you want to talk to them is different. The pain point that they have here is different than there. So there's a lot of little intricacies that you need to keep in mind in anything that you do. So, and I love the example that you said of this company that wanted to open in Morocco and they didn't manage. I have a friend who works in HR, and there's an American company that also wanted to expand into Saudi, and they were looking and they thought they will replicate exactly the same
you can't.
culture. It's a very different work culture anyways. That doesn't mean, again, I'm like very pragmatic when it comes to these things, it's good or bad. It's just different.
It is that, exactly.
It's that.
It's again, and my research is mostly descriptive, so I'm not trying to, attach value judgment on any of the findings. My question,
I like that.
Exactly, because you describe what it is.
To answer
Exactly. You try to explain. And the question is, how sustainable is that? Because people are people. We are emotions. If I'm working in an environment that I have to work because I have to work, and this I have to work because I'm afraid of lifestyle loss. Again, nothing severe, nothing ethically or morally wrong. It's not that. The discussion is not that. Again, we reached a point where, okay, we reached here. What's next? It's not, it's not a complaint. It's just that if we need to reach, so I'm working with another organization now that wants to reach to $1 billion revenue, right?
Okay.
When we assessed, and they're at 500 million now, so in the next 3 years, they want to reach 1 billion. When we assess the culture, when we assess the environment, it's absolutely counter to everything that $1 billion could do, because there's a different scale. And, I come from an engineering background.
That is.
When you scale, I mean, obviously.
Scaling is yeah.
And that 93% of startups fail because of scaling. That's why it's at the 5-year mark,
it's growth
right?
pain, right?
It is.
Either you break the bone or you actually are able to grow it in a healthy way.
And that's the point, right? That's the point. The challenge that I'm not the challenge, like the problem that I'm trying to investigate is, how do you know? Because you can easily be swayed by performative acts.
True.
You can easily be swayed. Like every time I ask people, I was like, we're not innovative here, pragmatically and objectively. Like, no, we're innovative. Look at Burj Khalifa. Look at, like, yes, that is innovation. Government is innovation. Services is innovation. Lifestyle is innovation. Safety is innovation. True. Now, what's next? It's not but. You understand? It's no easy feat. This is fantastic, and it's done out of nothing.
Next? How do we take it to the next level?
And that's the thing. That's scaling. And again, I come from an engineering background. So if you have a milliampere from a current perspective, you want to run it in a wire, it's different than mega ampere, like power and electronics. So you cannot run the same power that runs a generator that generates, I don't know, a factory on a wire that runs milliampere. It will fry it. And people, mental health, structure, and
burnout.
Burnout. And that compounds. The problem is, it gets so scary because no one sees it unless it's too late. And this is where it becomes, and that's the thing that I'm trying to explore with everyone. Is like, okay, how do we know that we're substantive and not performative? You know what I mean?
It's a very interesting question. And from my learning at least, in terms of scaling, like you said, you need to look into data points that are both qualitative and quantitative, right? And you are working towards specific KPIs. So there's, or OKRs, or whatever the metrics in the organization that you have are. There is way to look into them and see, okay, are we stagnating? Are we progressing? Are we not? But to your question is, how can we move in the right direction? How do we ensure that this team, whether in its current form or in a different form or more members or different members, can take it to the next level? And what's missing, and how can we improve, and how can we empower and support and move forward? And this, to me, is both art and science.
Yes, 100%.
And
I like that.
That comes with a combination. That's why typically, leadership also comes with experience, because yes, you can rely on science and data, and it's super important and super key to keep an eye on everything that's happening at every department level and at every individual level. But also, there is intuition. There is a sense of, I've learned through life that certain things work and others don't. And I can read and I can have that bird eye view to understand there's something off. Can we fix it? And what is required to be done there? That can apply at the very individual level, employee to employee, team member to team member, or at an organizational level, right? So sometimes you will see a team member that has so much to give, but maybe they're put in the wrong place.
Yes.
And that's fine to move them. I have a friend who works in a very big corporate, and she's been there for a very long time. And I'm amazed and fascinated by that corporation itself. And it's not here, it's actually abroad. the way they actually work with the employees, and it's fascinating because they treat the company like small startups. And if you're not happy here, but we value you as an employee, tell us what excites you. What are the we know you have certain skill sets. Let's plug you in different places and see. And they every few years, it's like she is changing companies, but she's within the same company. So she gets that excitement again, and she gets that drive again, that motivation again. And it's interesting, but she is that persona. So you have different employees persona. So there is art and science to it, is to understand also the human behind it.
Yes.
Because without your team, without the team members of any company, there's no company. You are your team, right? Sarwa is the team behind Sarwa. And it really, you have to really understand that to make it a success. Now, certain people like that framework of authority. Certain people thrive more in a flat structure. So also, even at this level, you need to kind of understand who you're bringing on board, who is working with you, and the way that they're motivated if you really want to make it successful. Yes, at the base is you look into numbers, you look into metrics, you look into KPIs, but you have to layer it with everything else.
I agree. Where do you see Sarwa in 10 years?
Nothing is off the table, as I like to say, because we're gonna keep growing it the way it's been growing, and again, like I said, we have a great team that keeps adapting and changing and shifting based on the environment. So to us at Sarwa, the most important thing is to keep listening to our clients, right? And to our market and what are the needs there. And a company evolves with its market. You can't stay, that's it. We're not made of stone. It's just you have to be flexible and adaptable and grow and shift and move and change, just like a human, right?
True.
So
I always say an organization is a living, breathing organism, right?
100%. 100%.
So where do you see it in 10 years?
The sky's the limit, honestly. Like I cannot, we of course have strategies and roadmaps and everything that you can imagine. But by the way, I'm no longer involved in the day-to-day with stuff.
Oh, you're not? Okay.
I'm still at the board level.
Where would you like it to be?
I'm pausing. Where would I like it to be? I'd like it to keep being, as it is today, true to its mission of helping young professionals in the region. And we're big on education. And I think we'll continue being big on education. We're going to give the tools that our market wants and needs, but also I'd like us to keep giving them the right information to make at least to trigger the thinking of how to be smart about it and how to be smart about money and how to be
so critical thinking
about money. And I think, again, it's a topic that's very big nowadays, is how do we bring that to kids level? How do you bring money education to schools, to kids? Because really, this is what impacts everything in our day-to-day, right? And my daughter who's 9 years old, the other day said to me, she's like, Mama, that saying money doesn't bring happiness? It's true, but it definitely helps.
She said that? Bless her heart.
Yeah.
MashaAllah.
And it's true. Again, going back to if you have financial stress, your life is going to be difficult.
Absolutely.
So you need to make sure at least you cover your basics properly, whether you're single or you have a family or you're taking care of your parents.
And
the first step is to really remove that financial stress.
I love that value and true to yourselves and to the mission part of Sarwa, seriously, because it's I don't want to say it's missing, because it's not. It's probably missing in the States, because it's extremely capitalistic. In our area here, the spirit of startups is always based on humans. And I see this over and over again. And every time I speak to someone, so I spoke with Rabi Ataya from Bay.com, and he absolutely gave me goosebumps after goosebumps from the amount of value, the values that he carries, and it's actually seen in his ventures. And that's a beautiful thing. So what's the most exciting thing you're working on right now?
my new company. I'm working on a new company, and then inshallah, you'll hear all about it soon.
Still, it's it's still the ingredients. You bring it in the kitchen. Okay, brilliant. I love that. Do you have a time frame?
Do I have a time frame? I do. So we're gonna try to stick to it.
What sector? Can you disclose or no?
It's a B2C retail sector. So I'm going to the consumer goods and things you can touch and feel. So very different than.
Oh wow. Okay. Great.
But the reality is, it does sit very close to the values that I hold dear. So yes.
That's why you said something about consumerism, because obviously it's aching you. And you want to fix it from the roots?
Look, you spoke about capitalism and all of this. Human nature, again, sometimes we're set on a trajectory and you don't know where it's going to take you, but we're going to all try to play our role and do what we can. But to me, personally, community is key. And yeah, I believe in the region. I think
Me too.
there's a lot of amazing things we can do here.
100%. It's a massive market. I mean, if you look at the market in the Middle East, it's about 300, 400 million. That's the US market. And the US market is the biggest market. And here we have more youth,
True.
right? We have
100%. Now
more
you have
youth.
an open market. Here is more segmented and fragmented, but there's a lot of potential. But even I wouldn't even limit it to here. Like you can build anything from here and take it to the world, right?
Yes. I mean, you start close by. So you start family, then community, then city, then country, then region, and so on and so forth. And if you're having that as your basic value, driving you and driving what you do, not just the money, not just the success at an individual level, but the intention is to be successful. Like I always say, I love the name of your company, Tera, right?
Yeah.
Because like people have, sometimes stigma against Tera. It's like, oh, you want to be rich? I was like, yes, I want to be rich. I want to be a millionaire and a billionaire, because guess what? That's the only way I can contribute back to my community. How can I contribute back to my community if I'm not rich? And you know what? I don't have to be bad to be rich. I can be good, be rich.
Of course you can.
Of course. And if I do that, and if that is the kind of step one is to be rich, and then step two to actually, so the ultimate goal is actually purpose, and that's
I like
a good
how
thing.
You put it. Purpose, yes.
That's a good thing, isn't it?
To me, I'm a mom. I have kids, and I think about their future, and I think about how I want the world they live in to be, and I want to work towards that in my baby steps. In any, it doesn't have to be the massive change, but it has to be something that we do to contribute positively to the future of their world, right? That's all we can do.
That's it. So what's your advice? The typical classic. What's your advice to startups, entrepreneurs, or people who aspire to change to achieve what we've discussed?
Well, if they have this aspiration, that's all it takes, right?
Oh, wow.
It's amazing to start there. Honestly,
so start with that.
Start. But be very realistic also about the expectations. And personally, to me, there's not a more rewarding journey. I love building, and I love taking anything from zero and seeing it grow massively. And I'm all about the little details and actionable tasks that can get you to that goal. But you have to have that drive. And if you have that drive, there will be challenges. There will be days where it's going to be very hard, because entrepreneurship is not rosy.
It's hard.
It's hard.
I just shifted from being an employee to being an entrepreneur. I'm telling you what, I needed to hear this before.
Of course.
Because I didn't know what I'm getting myself into.
Of course. It's a lot of work day in, day out.
Oh, goodness me,
but
yes.
if you have that drive,
100%, yeah.
And you really are able to think in solution mode, and it's not always easy, because sometimes a problem hits you and you really want to just...
We're only humans, right?
We're only humans, but think, okay, you know what? That's a problem, fine. I'm not going to stop there. What can we do now to take it to the next level? But the most important thing, if you want to really succeed, is to surround yourself with the right people that give you that energy to move forward.
Yes.
You don't want people to hold you back and push you back. You want people that push you forward. So have your little village, but accept the challenges, because they are part of the journey, and have perseverance and optimism, and think that, you know what, and really, really, for lack of a better word, envision that future you want to get to and work towards it.
Set your
If you know,
intentions.
set your intent, know what you want. Write it, visualize it, but know what you want, work towards it. It's a lot of hard work,
And there's no
To me, it's
substitute
worth
to
it.
that.
There's no substitute. There's no,
No
shortcuts.
Something like that. Yes, yes.
And
So
the
show
layer
up
of
and be
women,
disciplined.
to
Yeah.
be very clear, adds complexity. The layer of parenthood adds complexity. So be realistic about your commitments and about the fact that, you know what, if it's something you really want, you can do, but don't expect it to be easy. You have to have really the discipline because you want to be there for your kids. You want to also be there for your family and for your work, right? So we're not going to talk about balance because there's no balance.
No, there's no. I mean, it's priorities, and then it's your ability to maneuver those priorities in the most satisfying way to you.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
That's it.
Structure.
Yes.
To me, my kids will always come first, but my work is super important to me. That's my own drive, right?
That's amazing, Nadine. Thank you very much for your time. Really appreciate it. Thank
My
you.
pleasure. Honestly, I did not expect we're going to be talking about traffic and macros and all of the things we've discussed, but I'm really happy to be here. So thank you for having me.
You're most welcome.